Awesome. Thank you all for being here. My name is Margaret McKeever. I work at Hunter Industries as a mob programmer. I'm here with two of my colleagues, Lauren Carr and Art Bergquist, and we are here to talk about what it's like to mob program 24/7 at Hunter Industries. Because we're so passionate about mobbing, we decided to mob this talk. We're going to have this discussion formulated like a lean coffee. So we have all of our various discussion topics here shared on the board. Is anybody having issues seeing the Easy Retro board? Is everyone able to see it okay? See some nods? Great. I'll share the link here too. And oh, and I see some thumbs up. Thank you. So I would actually like to invite all of you wonderful attendees to throw your cards up on this board if there's anything in particular that you'd like to have us discuss, or any questions about mob programming or working at Hunter that you're curious about. And then we'll go through in lean coffee style. Lauren and Art and I will do a little affinity grouping. We'll upvote our favorite stuff, and then we'll use that to determine the conversation. Of course, we'll have a formal Q&A at the second half of the meeting. So if your topic doesn't come up, you'll have the opportunity to pose questions later. Great. Lauren, Art, why don't we start by introducing ourselves? Would either of you like to go first?
Sure. You want to go ahead, Lauren?
Yeah, I can go. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Carr. I am a senior software engineer at Hunter Industries. I've been there for about 3 years now. Started as an intern, so I really grew while I was at this company. And mob programming is kind of at my roots here. So I've given talks before at different conferences, including like Mob Programming Conference. And yeah, I'm happy Margaret invited me to come speak here. This would be great.
And I'm Art Bergquist, and I'm also a senior software engineer at Hunter, working with Lauren and Margaret, and started just under 2 years ago. And prior to this, in my entire career, I've never done mob programming before. So it's been a neat 2 years growing in the concept of mob programming and working simultaneously with others throughout the day. Been a neat 2 years.
Awesome.
And glad to be here.
Thanks. Awesome. And I'm Margaret. I'm actually the newest mob programmer at Hunter's mob programming department. I think this is my 6th week on the job, but I decided I really wanted to work at Hunter because I got very passionate about mob programming while working remotely. I've been a front-end engineer, then a back-end engineer, then a DevOps engineer, I've been a Scrum Master, and now I find myself as a mob programmer. I'm just very delighted to learn more about agile ways of building software with equity among engineers and those that contribute. Great. All right, let's get to it. Art, Lauren, why don't I set a timer for just maybe 3 minutes? All right, let's get to it. And why don't we take the opportunity to add any additional discussion topics to our Easy Retro board that might not already be there. And I also invite everybody in the audience, if there are any topics you want us to discuss, feel free to put those on the Easy Retro board. I also invite everybody in the audience, if there are any topics you want us to discuss. Also, I see Artie's comment in the chat, mobbing 24/7, huh? Sounds like the flip side of unlimited PTO. All I have to say about that is, also I see Artie's comment in the chat, mobbing 24/7, huh? Sounds like the flip side of unlimited PTO. All I have to say about that is, lol, Artie's comment in the chat, mobbing 24/7, huh? Sounds like the flip side of unlimited PTO. All I have to say about that is, lol.
And so when we're done adding our questions, do we just give you a thumbs up like this?
Sure, yeah, that sounds great.
Except somebody did put a thumb up. I gotta see how you do that again. Questions, do we just give you
a in Easy Retro or in Zoom?
Yeah, see, Sharon just did it.
There
I think.
We go.
Oh, here it is.
Yeah, there's the
ellipsis.
Oh, in Easy
no.
Retro or in Zoom?
Yeah, see, reactions. Got it.
There you go. Oh, Lauren's got it.
You could tell I use Teams a lot more than Zoom, so.
I was actually just gonna say at my prior job, we used Zoom and we used Slack, and I've been at Hunter using Teams for not very long, and I already forgot how Slack works and Zoom and everything. Prior job, we used Zoom and we used Slack, and I've been at Hunter using Teams for not very long, and I already forgot how Slack works and Zoom and everything. Awesome. So I got that thumbs up from Lauren, or was that just a reaction? Happy thumbs up.
No, I finished with any topics I was going to put up. Do you want to go into? Awesome. We can start thumbs upping the ones we want to talk about, or
that sounds great. I wanted to quickly affinity group things. Art, were you able to get your topics down?
Yes.
We'll see some more from the group. That sounds great. I wanted to quickly. Oh, that's a really interesting question. Art, were you able to get your topics down? Yes. All right. We still have about 30 more seconds. I want to give our audience that time if they have any other burning questions they want to pose to us. But I'm going to start doing some affinity grouping. Lauren, Art, I would really appreciate your input as I do this. There's one that I saw somebody asking, do we actually mob 24/7? I'm going to merge that with the struggles of mobbing all the time. Because the reality is, do we really mob 24/7? Great question. What does project management look like with mob programming? Fascinating. Necessity of psychological safety, which is remote.
I think I saw one at the bottom now that just was added. Mobbing is viewed by your management. You could go with your project management one.
Fantastic.
I think I saw one now that just was added. Mobbing is viewed by your management.
Nice.
Your project management one.
How do you encourage teams to try this without forcing? That's a great question.
Yeah.
I kind of want to merge that with the psychological safety one. How do you encourage teams to try this without forcing?
Very good.
And then we have renaming. That actually came up at an open that I attended recently.
Very good.
I think the top two, programming like us before coming to Hunter and remote mobbing look like at Hunter, because I feel like they kind of go into each other naturally of past and present. So
totally. And I know I'm going to want to pick both of your brains, Lauren and Art, about what it was like mobbing non-remotely, what it was like mobbing in person.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Before 4 times, yes.
Above, yeah, exactly. Okay. I think this is looking good. Actually, I think I'm going to also blend this one, the remote teams. How would you mob if you're remote? I'm going to merge that with the struggles of mobbing. Great.
Nice.
All right. I think these are affinity groups. Art, Lauren, why don't we each get maybe 4 votes? We have a lot of topics, and I want to make sure that we can use our votes to like highly vote things if we want. I'm just going to set a 2-minute timer. And why don't we upvote the items that we most want to discuss? And since I'm sharing, everyone will see what I upvote.
I'll try not to look so I don't skew the.
Since I'm sharing, everyone will see what I upvote.
I'll try not to look so I don't skew the.
Oh, I guess we only have 3 on this one. Let me actually fix that. There we go. Great. Oh, I guess we only have 3 on this one. Let me actually fix that. There we go. Great. All right, I see Lauren's ready. Art's ready. All right, I'm ready. So we're going to sort by votes. Ooh, all right.
So many interesting topics.
So many interesting topics. All right, let's get down to it. So it looks like the first topic that we wanted to discuss is, what does project management look like within our mob programming world? Is it different than other places we worked at? And then also, what does mobbing, how does our management view mobbing? Or maybe even for us, how does like other parts of our business view our mobbing? Lauren, Art?
Want to start, Lauren?
Sure, I can start. I've been on 3 different teams at Hunter alone. And so I've been, worked with several different types of product owners and project management on a lot of different things. And I've heard some of the history, though I wasn't around, that long ago, or how project management came to incorporate mobbing into their own workflows. So there's a couple things about our mob programming that were a little tricky at first, from what I understood, because we also are a no estimates workshop, and so. But marketing and finance are very much about estimates and due dates and when things are going to be released when. And so in combination with now on a team of 12 people, for instance, instead of having 12 separate people working on 12 separate things, you now have 3 groups of 4 people working on only 3 things, right? So the output is a little bit different. But over time and through really good relationships with our product owners and project management and all of our stakeholders, they found that the quality of the product was stronger when we mobbed it versus just single people working on it. There was a lot less bugs. It was a lot easier to maintain. And so that took time. It wasn't definitely not an overnight thing of, oh man, this mob program is great. It was kind of a hard pill to swallow at first, but the results have shown for themselves that it works. And they sometimes still push back on us of like, why can't I have just pairs instead of mobs? Why can't I have, but the amount of quality software that we get through by mobbing and having such a variety of people on each feature really pays for itself in the end. So it's still always a relationship under development. I don't think any single one of the product owners, maybe a couple I've worked with, are like super gung-ho about it and like, I totally get it. I love it. But being a project manager is an old and established tradition, and right, there are traditional ways of doing it. And so it's really having that open conversation has helped us a lot. And I think it's pretty positive. We hear good things. Sometimes they have some issues and we talk through it. We work through new experiments on how to make it better. But overall, I think it's a very positive experience and it continues to go that direction. So.
Yeah, I know one thing that we were just talking about in my team stand-up was actually how our product owner has, over the years, gotten really comfortable with the way that we work and that we mob program. And Lauren's right, we do no estimates, hashtag no estimates, right? And that can be a little contentious for, the project management side. But I do think that it's very important that as long as we focus on communicating and having open communication, then we're able to at least have real discussions and real conversations with our project managers or product owners. So even if we don't necessarily do things the traditional way, we still have these open dialogues. So everyone feels like they're aware of what's going on and included in how we work and what we focus on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Looking at the card, I know there's the affinity grouping and some overlap. But I think I kind of consider these slightly separate questions, and I think you've both kind of covered maybe the way I interpreted it. You covered the second question very, very well, and I was going to add on the first question as well. As you talk about the product owners, we meet with them on a daily basis, so they're constantly seeing what we're working on, helping us change direction if we're heading off in the wrong direction. And like you were saying, that constant communication going on. Also, with our particular product owner in our sub mob, we are, like you said, he's understanding that we have no estimates, but he also is understanding this concept that Lauren has really keyed in on vertical slicing, feature slicing, trying to focus on, even if we're working on an entire feature, what kind of minimal features can we work on, or sub features within this entire thing we're working on. So again, communicating on all aspects, the granularity of what we're communicating, the regularity of what we're communicating. So on a daily stand-up, And then we even have monthly software updates with our product owners and with all of management and the rest of the company. So I think that word communication is really key here.
So true, Art. And Art, I want to ask, since you and I have both come to Hunter partway through our careers, what are your thoughts on what project management might have been like at prior jobs comparison to working at Hunter now?
Oh yeah, I've mentioned the concept of mobbing. That was a great question, by the way, Margaret. I've mentioned the concept of mobbing to a previous manager, and they start kind of cringing and grimacing, in the sense of multiple people working on the same thing at the same time, and thinking about the profitability of that concept, but they don't understand that you're cross training one another, domain knowledge wise, development stack wise, and these things. So there's huge benefits, and the peer review of the code right away. You don't have to have this separate code review process, right? And then integrating emerging changes and whatnot. You keep the pipeline flowing. So great
yeah,
question.
I love that metaphor, keeping the pipeline flowing. That is totally what it feels like.
It's important to note too that the way we constructed our mobs at Hunter isn't based on level or anything like that. You have, full stack working with associate, working with every level in between. And so you really get that mixture of experience, and you're leveling up each other all at the same time. So, someone who's been in the industry longer or has more experience can bring an associate into a contributing space much faster. And that just makes the product better, cleaner, and easier to work with in general.
Yeah. And that actually kind of ties back to project management a little bit, because I feel like from my experience, project managers or just generally team structures might be inclined to grab something that's a really high priority and give it to your most experienced engineer and say they'll let them work their magic. And then juniors maybe are missing that opportunity. But Lauren, you're exactly right. We don't really do things that way at Hunter. We let teams really be cross-functional, and we let teams really truly have a range of experience levels. And I think that is really powerful, even though on the surface, it might seem like it would be not as powerful as it is. Mm-hmm. And I think that is really powerful. Art, Lauren, anything else to add for this card? All right, let's move on to the next one. Actually, I'm very excited about this one. What ceremonies / routines / rituals do we have mobbing all of the time? And then also somebody asked, how many mobbers are too many in the mob? What's the optimal number?
Yeah, so I've heard our director say this a couple of times, and I think it's just happened over the last, 10 years almost of experiments. And I think it was decided like 4 was a really good number, 4 or 5, depending on the team and how many resources you have. Because 2 is obviously a pair, and if someone has to go to a meeting or go off, the other person's kind of hanging. 3 is still kind of the same way, just with the frequency of meetings and whatnot. It doesn't allow for as much flexibility. So 4 is a really great number that just works for us, but it's different for every company and team, psychologically, and how everyone interacts together. Sometimes I've seen pairs be extremely strong, and meetings don't hinder them or stop them in any way. And sometimes I've seen 5 people be a lot of info coming in. And so you need to kind of be like, okay, maybe we should shrink this down. It's a little too much noise coming through. When I was an intern 3 years ago, our group of interns was 7 people all mobbing at once. And we got halfway through the internship. We're like, okay, this is a lot. Let's split into 2 teams and let's just coordinate with each other a lot. Because a lot of input's really good, but also you want to have a controlled amount of input, because otherwise you won't be able to make a decision. But ceremonies and rituals and routines. So again, this is dependent on the team. So right now I'm on a small team of just 3 people. And so we don't do anything like switching or moving around. Granted, the department in general has the ability to just switch to a different project if you want. You can go visit for, a short period of time or swap with someone else just to keep track of head counts for logistical purposes. But I've come from both the teams previously were 12 and 9 about thereabouts. And so we would have rituals of we would switch to different mobs every Monday, or we would, be like, hey, I don't really want to work on this. I'm not feeling engaged. I'm not contributing. I'm not learning. Let me switch somewhere else I can contribute. Because that's a really big thing in our department, is making sure that you are engaged and you're learning as well as contributing. If you are only contributing, you're not growing internally, then maybe it's time to move to a different project where you can expose yourself to new things.
Just to add to that, Lauren, we actually have a rule that if you have been on one project for more than 2 years, you have to switch off, because there is such a focus on learning and making sure that we don't have silos of tribal knowledge, right? So that everybody gets to share that information on all of our different teams.
And that has come in handy so many times when someone who's been at the company for very long does leave and they've had so much knowledge. Maybe they haven't been able to share everything that they've always learned, because that's just literally impossible. But so much of it has just been shared through dispersion of people that come into their mob, or that knowledge has been shared throughout the department. And that's another important ritual too. You mentioned learning. Hunter is very focused on internal growth and internal learning. And so we have a learning hour at the beginning or end of every day, depends on what your schedule would fit. And then an extended learning period on Friday afternoons for a couple hours. And that really allows us to either, for an associate, it was extremely helpful for me, catching up on the project I'm on and figuring out the language and learning all this new stuff. And now as a senior, it's helping me with developing my career more and bringing new technologies into the mob and those kind of experiments and stuff like that. So those are like some rituals I can notice off the top of my head.
Yeah.
What about you two?
Sure. So just to contrast, Lauren said that she's on a team that's like its own mob, right? There's three people on the team and they are their mob. And Art and I are on a bigger team with about 12 of us. That's 3 mobs within the team. So one important ritual that we have is that on Mondays, we will allow members of the mobs to rotate and be able to move on to a different mob, having a different focus, working on a different feature. And part of this is very important, like what Lauren and I were saying, is we try to share context, right? And we don't want one person to become the only person that knows everything that's going on. And I think that the mob rotation is actually a really neat routine, because it also lets you just kind of switch who you're working with. So it allows you to build those relationships with every member on your team instead of just the people that might be in your sub mob. So what other routines do we do, Art? We do the mob switch. We do have a daily stand-up.
Right. And it was funny because when I first read this question, I was like, ceremonies and rituals. That just sounded so exotic. But I was leaning more towards the word routines. But part of the ceremonies, I think we mentioned earlier about monthly software updates, where to the product owners and to the rest of the company. But we do have a new little ceremony of celebrate after that. And so with our director, we kind of celebrate the accomplishments from that past month. So that was one of my bullet points coming out of hearing you both speak just now. Something else I wanted to mention, when you talk about the number of mobbers within a mob, there's also the concept of roles within the mob. And I won't go into too much detail, but there is a show by 2 of our coworkers called the Mob Mentality Show podcast. And so that's something where they've talked about mob roles. And when you have additional people, they can also be doing research as well to help in the mob. Are we struggling with a particular task and extra research going on? And then one other thing I wanted to mention, I know that we're not as heavy on documentation but with the more recent discovery or rediscovery for me, because we're using Azure DevOps right now, of the wiki, I've been enjoying, creating a wiki to help as part of that, not having tribal knowledge and those kind of things. So for things that are more esoteric and that you don't do every day, it's kind of helpful to have that as another resource. So again, we're not too documentation heavy in terms of specifications and whatnot. And actually, the idea is to have your unit tests be, your specifications, those kind of things. So those are just a few bullet points that I had.
Awesome. Thanks, Art. Actually, when you were talking about some of those rituals, it made me think of something. One thing that I thought was really interesting when I started working at Hunter is that we don't do sprints or iterations. I know my last job, we did a lot of Scrum, so we were really used to that. Every 2 weeks, you do these certain routines or ceremonies. And we do have this cadence, like you said, we have the monthly software update. So there's that kind of a monthly cadence. And we do, at least on my team, we do a weekly retro. So we just kind of reflect on the last week.
Yes.
We also do a retro where we talk specifically about experiments that we're trying. So we have a designated time where we specifically discuss that. Yes. And I think having that kind of cadence can help bring routine, but it is really refreshing not having that all of the Scrum framework being applied to us.
I'm so glad you brought up those other retros, Margaret, because I have to be honest, 2 years ago when I first started, I was like, there's a lot of meetings that we have, but it actually is good to break up, the technical heads down, we're working in the mob kind of thing. And just kind of, I like to use the term helicopter back out, get a bigger view and say, in these retrospectives, we get to reflect and say, well, how can we improve, or what's going well, or how can we improve, and just kind of reflect on our processes. And I think that has been very, very helpful. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
And just kind of reflect
on Lauren, Art, anything else to add for this part?
That has been very, very helpful. So thank you for bringing that up.
I guess I would add, we do have certain, technical routines or technical ceremonies like a lot of other companies. But we do have this lofty goal within the department of automation. And so if we are doing something too often, or we have the wikis are really nice for, if it's something we really don't do very often, but if we find ourselves we're doing this once a week, okay, we need to automate this because we are trying to optimize our time within the mob, right?
Nice.
And having 4 people mob pushing a button is not fun. Yeah. So automation is a really big thing for us. And I guess I could consider that like a ritual or a routine is having that moment of realization of okay, this is kind of building up. We need to automate this or figure out an alternative solution or something.
Great point.
And other technical things like test-driven development and stuff like that the whole department has adopted, and we do our best every day to do. We're not perfect, but we all try to remind ourselves and keep each other accountable of those goals and stuff like that. But those are kind of just now baked into our workflow and don't have as much of, I guess, a ceremony about them because they're just natural at this point. But at the beginning or when someone is first starting out, that can seem a little overwhelming with so much info coming in. It becomes very natural very quickly because of mobbing. So.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Lauren, about the automation. Go ahead, Art.
Oh, I was just going to say, I appreciate your honesty about TDD. The ideal is that we do test-driven development, but if perhaps we didn't start out with a unit test and we made it afterwards, I call it TAD, so test after development. So we got it all covered, right?
There's a test, it's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Test. You try to put first, but
yeah, I think Lauren, you hit on a really good point too about the fact that we consider this a lofty goal, right? It's like a North Star that we aspire to do, and we have varying levels of success applying that because we're mere mortals, right? But we do have these goals that we aspire to. And I found that very refreshing coming here. I know I worked at other places that try to teach TDD and then don't actually do it. So it's really nice that like Art said, even if we TDD after and it's not really test driven, at least we focus on the TDD. It's almost like TDD driven development.
Right.
Cool. Anything else to add for this card? All right. Let's move on to the next one. So this one will be a cool one. So obviously we're all working remotely now. And Hunter originally had people mobbing in person. So what was that transition like starting to mob remotely? Was that hard for folks to get into that rhythm of remote mobbing? And then kind of additionally, what was programming like for us prior to coming to Hunter? Our experiences writing code professionally as opposed to mobbing, and then also as opposed to mobbing remotely. I'm happy to start with that. I know for me, I really didn't like programming individually. I thought that I was over programming, but I got really excited about the idea of mob programming, especially working remotely. And I decided I wanted to take another crack at it. And now I just love it. Programming in a mob is awesome. You don't feel like you're alone. And any times that maybe if you were working individually, you might get stuck on a logical problem or get distracted or start to get down on yourself if you can't figure something out, you have 2 or 3 other colleagues there to help share your thoughts and brain power with. What was mob programming like when everyone was in person? Loud, I've heard, very noisy.
There's a lot of soundproofing walls, yeah, to separate the different groups so we weren't this weird cacophony. So yeah, I could talk about it. So I've only been in the industry 3 years. So mob programming is kind of my roots. I was at the college and decided to sign up for this internship for this weird sounding company that was doing like everyone programs together. What is this? And ended up staying. I really enjoy the collaborative effort that comes with it because you're not, like you mentioned, just by yourself feeling like an island that if it's not working out, something's going wrong. You're having to interrupt someone else's day or you're having to, struggle with that internally, which just can lead to nasty code. And so when we were in office, it was one contiguous room with a bunch of soundproof walls put up that were some were on wheels and some were baked into the infrastructure. And you had the different projects in their different areas and everyone at a standing desk or in their chair if they weren't currently programming with one keyboard, one mouse, and 2 giant like 80-inch TVs hooked up to a computer so everyone could see it. And you just mobbed for 8 hours, break for lunch. And then, it was loud. And there were times where, a meeting would come in or a project owner would come in and we'd kind of like enclose all the walls or we'd have to, transfer to the conference room that we had or anything like that. And there were interns and it was a whole thing. But it was a really enjoyable environment because you could overhear, people and the other mob, say like on your group where you have 3 different mobs, for 12 people, you could overhear what the other mob was doing behind you and you were kind of aware of what was happening all the time. So it was a lot of sensory overload, but in a good way. And the smaller mobs were kind of isolated, to their small teams in their remote corners. So then when we went remote, which was literally a 24-hour pick up and go home, there wasn't a lot of, oh, we're going to be going remote next week, everyone prep. It was like, oh, by the way, you can't be in the office tomorrow due to COVID. And that just developed very fast.
Wow.
And there wasn't really options for remote previously because mobbing doesn't lend itself initially to some people at home, some people in the office, because then you have a lot of noise between all the Zoom calls. So we picked up that night, went home the next day. We logged into Teams, which we hadn't been using a ton. So we all had to learn Teams very quickly and tried 1,000 experiments to make it work. It wasn't very smooth at the beginning. There was a lot of things, especially for the bigger teams, there were a lot of struggles because now you couldn't overhear other people. You couldn't just get up and walk over and ask a question. Meetings weren't as organic as they were, where you could just say, hey, everyone stop, we have a quick issue or we have a question or something. It was much more formal because of Teams. And now we have a ton of meetings for that reason, because we need to check in with each other more often to keep the pipeline flowing. So it was a struggle at first. It was much more daunting, and you felt a little more isolated to your group of people. So me, on being a small team, and I'm not in that big team anymore where I rotate and talk to a bunch of people, it's the same two people all the time, and I have no clue what's going on in the other projects. I could just say, hey, invite me to your call, I just want to talk, like, hey, what's up, how's it going? But there's that formality to it, rather than I'm just taking a break, strolling around the office, or I'm gonna go take a walk outside, at the park we had, and all this stuff. So it was a little daunting at first. I think it works really well now. We've ironed through a lot of the stuff, and we're still doing that because we have a constant experimentation mindset. And stuff comes up because life in this new unprecedented times, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it wasn't as daunting because I didn't have previous experience working by myself professionally before coming to Hunter. So it was very more of a natural flow for me to go, oh, I just pick this up and do it at home. That's all I know. As that's kind of been a thing for me of, I haven't worked by myself. So you get that kind of imposter syndrome that comes with that of, is it the mob or is it me that knows this thing? But I think over time, and mobbing lends itself to that, you kind of, you gain so many skills and you have so many supporters. Everyone is trying to make everyone, grow and look good at the same time. We're all in it together. And so, even remote, I think all of those mindsets and all of those psychological and just personal relationships that we had is what was maintained. And that's probably the most important part of it.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question for you, Lauren, actually, from Michael Wolf. How did interning at Hunter change your approach to finishing your degree, or what your expectations were for learning, for working, studying in college? Did you see that interning at Hunter changed your perception as opposed to maybe your other peers that didn't work in a mobbing setting?
Yeah, so when I was interning, I was in my last year, and I actually got hired on during the internship and then just switched right over. So I was still in school. So I was going to class in the morning and then running to work right after. So I was up at 7 a.m. to go to class and then come to work, before 8:30, and then stay for my learning session after work. And I heard a lot of my friends doing the job hunt and going to these interviews, and at Hunter, even, everyone at that time for sure had previous experience at other companies that did the traditional workflows of either like Scrum or Waterfall, or and so they did educate us about that during the internship of like, here's what it's actually like a lot of the times out there. It's not always like this. And so interning, I had a good variety of perspectives, which is ironic because that's what mobbing does.
Yeah.
I think it shaped me in the way that finishing my degree, I didn't have as much like mystery to how the industry was and what it could be. Hunter is a really unique place to work, and I know it's not like everywhere. If everywhere were like Hunter, this wouldn't be as special, right? To do mob programming and no estimates and all the rituals that we do. You would have heard about it in college. And so it being my first career place has been extremely helpful. And I think it has prepared me more for what future jobs would be in the traditional sense, because it established for me a strong communicative skills and strong collaborative. Like, I have no hesitation now to ping someone and ask, hey, I need help. Hey, can you come work on this with me? It's natural, right? And sometimes I think when you're a new programmer out of college, that's scary to do because you don't have those relationships, or you just don't have the confidence to be like, hey, I don't actually know what's happening. I went through the interview. I got through the interview. Wow. How do I work? So it gave me a lot of confidence in that way. And it was a lot of mentoring and really a strong coaching environment. And I think that's extremely helpful for college students. And that's why we try to do that at Hunter. We have a strong relationship with the local college in trying to coach them on what we do, though it's not as normalized, but maybe they can try to normalize it through their work or have another tool in their tool belt to incorporate into their jobs. So it shaped me into a more confident person, no matter if I struggle with certain things. Technically, I feel like I have no problems asking any questions or admitting that I don't know something. I definitely don't know everything.
I feel like if there's one thing about mob programming that everybody could take out to their own world, it would be that, like, not having the fear to ask for help or asking somebody to join you on something.
Yes.
I feel like that's really boils down to its essence. It's that, you know, inviting people to come and join you and working on something with you.
Mm-hmm. Or being asked to join someone else is extremely confidence boosting.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's both sides of that coin, right?
Mm-hmm. Or being asked to join someone else.
All right, we already have only 10 minutes left. Why don't we get to our next card? We can talk about whether we actually mob program 24/7. I've been getting a lot of comments about this title. Yes, it was a little clickbaity, but also it's fun. So what struggles maybe do we have with the amount of time mob programming that we do? Do we actually mob program all the time? And then somebody also asked how you could do that across different areas on the world. I'll start by saying, at least at Hunter right now, I think we're all in the same time zone, even if we do have a couple people in different cities. So we at Hunter don't quite have that experience yet with mobbing across maybe different time zones or even different continents. I would imagine that would be hard because so much of it is that you are there together, and that would be hard if you have a 10-hour time zone difference. So that's probably an open question that we all can seek to find best ways and how to mob across continents or countries. Art, Lauren?
Yeah, I think we actually do have two mobbers on the East Coast, and one in the Mountain time zone. We have not had to deal with this international issue, as far as I know. And so, and yeah, we're pretty much like 7 hours a day, like Lauren was saying, with the 1 hour of learning time. So the 7 hours is the mobbing together, but the learning time, sometimes people choose to do learning time with other co-developers, or they'll do learning time on their own. And as she mentioned, on Fridays, it's an extended learning time of 3 hours. And again, some of that may be on your own doing learning time or working with others. And so, and every hour, or is it every 45 minutes, we try to take about a 10-minute break. So, just have to take a bio break, or need to just knock off something, real quickly. But so I think that's good to also have the breaks in there, and then you have the lunch hour. And our director really tries to be very good about saying, take that time off when it's at the end of the day and you're done. Try not to, it doesn't push for overtime. I mean, I think maybe once or twice we've had to do overtime because of some particular issue, on a client site, but it's not a regular occurrence, because if you make that a regular occurrence, that's a recipe for burnout. And so we they want us to, you know, be there for the long haul.
Yeah. I feel like this kind of ties back to some of the stuff that Woody Zuhl speaks about in,
Yes.
you know, when mob programming was being developed at Hunter, is that we should always be 5 minutes away from logging off and like going to hug our family members, right?
Nice.
And so that part of that is mobbing, right? And part of that is also TDD, but part of that is also just appreciating the human beings that work there for being humans, right? And yes. I think that making time for breaks is a part of that. And this kind of also ties back to psychological safety or even just like, you know, emotional intelligence for your fellow teammates, just making sure that we create that time that we can decompress as we were working really diligently together, and making sure that at the end of the day, we really can log off and say bye to work and focus on our home lives.
Well, I was going to say, if we're working remotely from home, we're probably like 1 minute away from being able to step up and hug our family. So
exactly.
Depends on the hallway, depends if there's traffic, you know. The amount of times I've been stopped in the hallway by my cat is infrequent. And I'm like, okay, never mind. I'm not going to eat dinner. You're correct.
We'll see.
Awesome. One thing too that I wanted to mention about the question, do we really mob 24/7? I think that one of my favorite things about working at Hunter is that while we don't mob 24/7, we do mob more than just programming. Like one thing I love is being in the mob and say, oh, we really need to reach out to this person. They have the expertise that we need to solve this problem. And we'll draft an email together, or we'll agree together to send an IM, and we'll draft the IM together, and we'll all be like, oh, what do you think of this? Did we miss anything? And someone might be, oh, it might be important to add this detail to our message, and making it that group activity. I think while we maybe don't mob day and night, we do mob more than just programming.
So that is so excellent what you just said, Margaret, because both you and Lauren brought out this point that there are times that you may need to ask for help. And it doesn't matter how long you've been in the industry, because there's all these different technologies, and no one person can be an expert at all these technologies. And then within the technologies, the nuances and the granularities within. And so that, I think it's a humility that says, I don't know everything. I need your help sometimes. And so to be able to say that, I think is you know, allows you to move forward and progress, and all of us together, you know, can help one another. So I love that. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, we're about 5 minutes to time. This was such a great conversation, Lauren and Art. Thank you for joining me and mobbing this talk. I said at the start of the call that we'd have some time for Q&A. Not very much time, but I did want to give the opportunity if anybody had questions based on what we discussed. I see Joel turned his camera on. Any other last questions for Lauren and Art and I?
What is the awkward silence rule at Hunter? How long do you wait?
Ooh, I love waiting through an awkward silence because it's so important to make time to think, right?
What I've found is if you stare right at your webcam and everyone's awkwardly silent, someone will talk.
There you go.
I had to get my team used to like 20, I did like 20 seconds of awkward silence. So I'm like, okay, anything else on this topic? And I just sit there and everyone's just like fidgeting. And I'm like, if you have something, this is the time to say it. Like I'll leave the space. But there's a couple people that are still a little uncomfortable with that kind of silence. And so
I actually have a question. Is there really a Canton in every single state?
It's, you know, don't check my math, but there's a Canton in Ohio. There's a Canton in Michigan. There's a Canton in China. So there's a Canton in almost every state. And don't test the marketing team. They're not very good. So there's a Canton in almost every state. So have we waited the awkward silence? And it's okay, not to have questions. They're not very good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So first of all, I want to thank you, Art, Lauren, Margaret. Love to have you guys come talk, maybe not about mob programming, maybe about coding. This is a coding group. We don't just have to talk about mob programming. But I appreciate everyone that came to talk today. Appreciate Hunter. Thanks, Chris and Austin, for making this politically okay to do. If you're interested about, hey, you know what, I'm tired of working alone in my basement, right, with my cat, and I want to work in a mobbing organization, is there any resources you can, this group can share to get a hold of to join maybe a mob? I don't know if Hunter's hiring, but if you know of any other organizations like that.
Sure. So I just shared a link actually on Chris Nation's blog that is a Trello board with a bunch of companies that all do mob programming. So feel free to peruse that. There's actually a ton of places that will do mob programming in the United States. So start by going through there. And I just shared Hunter's career site. I don't know if we have any mob programming opportunities open now, but I do believe that we're still in a growth phase. So we might be hiring soon. Feel free to check there as well if there are any opportunities at Hunter.
Wonderful. And if people want to get a hold of you and say, I have questions, like how many violin cases do you need for mob programming? We haven't gotten to that joke yet today, did we? Wonderful. How can they reach out to you? What's the best way to get a hold of you? Twitter, LinkedIn, MySpace?
Well, definitely not MySpace. I'm on Twitter at Margaret McKeever. I'm also on LinkedIn. I think also just at Margaret McKeever. I love connecting with people, so please feel free to reach out.
And a shameless plug is you did join our Slack.CantonCoders.org.
I did.
Nice.
Lauren, Art, what about you two?
I'm primarily on, you can find me on LinkedIn, just Lauren Carr Hunter. You'll see me very clearly with the Hunter background on it. It's all Hunter everywhere. So that's a really good way to just reach me quickly, or if you have questions, feel free to reach out or connect.
Yeah, and I'm also on LinkedIn.
So appreciate everyone's time today. If you're on YouTube watching this, join us. We do this about every Wednesday. Either we're coding or we're learning about how other teams work. And remember, it's about you, not your employer. Work on you and not them. And have a wonderful time. And I'm going to turn off Twitch now.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.